everyone, and welcome to Royals at the Ranch, episode 10. I can't believe it's already been 10 weeks since we started this series about Royal Python behavior, temperament, and training. I am joined tonight by Fulcrum, and I'm just going to let him have some exercise time on this activity area while we go through our episode tonight, because I have lots in store for you. This week, we're going to get back to our story about Amun and Amunet. We're going to have a training talk, and then we're going to see our favorite segment, Royals in Your Homes. When last we left off with our story of Amun and Amunet, the first two Royals that we added to our behavior program, they were housed in chondro tubs after being moved from the rack-style baby bins that I had them in the first few days they were here. Both of them were eating frozen thawed rodents from tongs right from their first feeding here, and all along they've eaten either mice or rats. That hasn't been an issue. Typical behaviors that I was seeing over the next 6 weeks while they were housed in these chondro tubs were lying in or on their humid hide, and that humid hide was just a sealed container that had damp sphagnum moss inside. They did a lot of draping on the ledge above the door. That seemed to be one of their preferred spaces. They slept during the day mostly underneath the paper towels or inside of the coconut hide that each of them had in their enclosure. At night, they did lots and lots of moving around and climbing. They would not only climb on that ledge above the door, but they would climb on all of the PVC perching in there and over the tops of all of the furnishings I had in there. They got in ambush positions quite frequently, and I could really tell when they were getting hungry and would likely not refuse food if I offered, when they would move their ambush position around to different locations within the enclosure. So sometimes they would hang off the PVC perching. As you see Amunet doing in this photo, she's partially on the ledge above the door and partially hanging over one of the PVC perches. And Amun would actually wrap his tail and lower third of his body completely around the 3/4 inch PVC perch, and he would hang down in an ambush position. They would also often sit in their coconut hides in an ambush position, sticking their head and neck out of the front of the hide. They would drape across the edge of their humid hide and hang off of it with their head and neck in an ambush position looking down at the ground. And then they would oftentimes hang off of that ledge above the door, and that is until they started to outgrow that a little bit. So when did I know that it was time to move them into a larger habitat? Well, I started to see a lot more disruption in their enclosure furnishings, and I would go to bed about 4 a.m. and get up at about 10 a.m. And when I got back up at 10 a.m., having left them active and moving around when I went to bed, I would find enclosure furnishings knocked over, the water dumped over. I would find some of the PVC perches knocked either completely or partially off. And they were just more active in general when I was watching them. And then there were some escape attempts on their part. So all of these were clues that it was probably time to move them out of these chondro tubs and into more permanent housing. So this is how I transition them to their Vision 3x2x2 enclosures. And Vision doesn't actually make an enclosure that's exactly 3x2x2. I think it's 36 inches long by 23 or 23.5 inches deep and 21 inches high, but it's their version of the standard 3x2x2 enclosure. Each of them had an identical one. So Amunet got moved on May 15th, 2020, following a shed cycle, and she was moved into a fully furnished enclosure, but her juvenile tub was moved with her, and that juvenile tub was fully furnished as well. And it had 2 holes in it, one on top and one on the side. So if she wanted to stay in the tub and never leave it, she certainly could do that, because I had substrate in there, water, and a hide and everything she would need. Or she could choose to come out and utilize the habitat at large. I put the same humidity box in there with the coconut hide over the hole that was on top of the humidity box. The first day that I moved her, I tongue fed her a frozen thawed mouse, which she took with no problem. The new furnishings that were in this habitat were an actual ledge by Mag Naturals that was magnetically stuck to one end of the enclosure, additional perching, an actual real branch going from one corner of the enclosure on the bottom up to the opposite corner and on the top, a large water tub instead of just a water dish that was big enough for them to get their whole body in, an actual ceramic cave, and then a large rectangular black plastic Reptile Basics hide. I moved Amun on May 26, 2020, so about 11 days after Amunet moved. Amun moved into his habitat, and that was again following a shed cycle. Everything else was identical. He moved with his fully furnished juvenile tub that he could live in if he wanted, and the same humidity box with the coconut hide. I fed him that day I moved him. I tongue fed him a frozen thawed mouse, which he took no problem. And then the new furnishings were identical to those that Amunet had. A Mag Naturals ledge, perching, a branch, a large water tub, a cave, and a large rectangular black plastic Reptile Basics hide. Both habitats were set up identically, so everything was in the exact same place in both habitats. Nothing was different in either one. This is what it looks like, and the reason that this picture is taken through the glass is this was early on after the move, and I didn't want to open the doors to disturb Amun. But if you start on the left, you'll see his juvenile tub. So that opaque tub with the black handles and the white lid was fully furnished inside. It had paper substrate, it had a water dish, and it had a hide. There was a hole on top that led into this black plastic rectangular hide, which I have on top of the tub. And then there was also a hole on the side in the bottom that he could come out of and go straight out onto the substrate, which at this time was Repti chips, into the habitat at large. He had a pretty thick branch going from the lower left corner to the upper right corner. That blue color you see in the middle is a large water tub that he's able to put his whole body in. And then on the far right, you see that cave. It's a ceramic cave with a round hole opening, and just behind that is his humid hide. It's the same one from his Condor tub, and it has a coconut hide on top. The Mag Naturals ledge is above and to the right of that cave that you see, and Amunet's enclosure was identical to this one. They each had this PVC perch running across the front with some fake vines on it. These are just some more close-up images of what the interior of his habitat looked like. On the far right, you can now see that Mag Naturals ledge behind the branch. He's actually on it, and he's hanging off of the Mag Naturals ledge in an ambush position. Behind him, you can see another white PVC. So I had a white PVC going diagonal across the corner adjacent to each of the Mag Naturals ledges. And then you can see the branch going across the front, and underneath and behind the branch is that humid hide. You can just barely see the coconut hide on top of it, and then his ceramic hide in front. And then moving to the left, in the middle of the enclosure was the blue water dish, and then to the far left again was a juvenile tub that was fully furnished inside if he wanted to live in that and not come out of it, and then a Reptile Basics hide on top. And then again, that PVC perch, it's the 3/4 inch PVC perch going across the top of the habitat. This habitat had a heat mat underneath the tub, the little juvenile tub, at nighttime. And then during the day, each one had a halogen and a UVB bulb available on one side of the enclosure if they wanted to bask. All right. So next time in episode 11, we're going to pick up where this story left off, and I'm going to go over what the next 8 weeks looked like following their moves into these more environmentally stimulating habitats and into these larger habitats than what they were used to. Now we're going to have a training talk. I think this is our first training talk of this series, and I'm just going to talk about target training, real briefly what it is, and the first steps in initiating target training. So target training is just teaching the snake to touch part of its body to a target or to approach a target with all or part of its body. Now, usually that's going to be the head. Usually I have the snakes approach or touch the target with their nose or their head. Sometimes I'll have them rest their chin on a flat target. But if you're using a station as an actual target, like a tub or a box or a scale, they're going to obviously learn to move their whole body onto the station if the station is acting as the target. So the target becomes a cue or a signal. It's a core foundation behavior, and it's just a tool for training other behaviors in the future. Like this one that you'll see here, which is one of my Bredl's pythons. He has targeted out of his enclosure. This is a 5x2x2 black box cages enclosure. He's a 1-year-old Bredl's python, and he's targeted out of his main habitat and onto an activity station just by following that blue disc. And then he gets reinforced for that. Okay, so step one, if you want to teach your snake to do target training, is very, very simple. It's the simplest step that you're going to do, and that's just to pair the target with a primary reinforcer. And primary reinforcers are things like food, water, shelter, things that the animals naturally gravitate towards because they need them to survive. Food is typically the primary reinforcer that I always use when I initiate target training. This is just classical conditioning or plain associative learning, nothing complicated. We're just conditioning the target to elicit a response from the snake. So right now the target's a neutral stimulus. It doesn't mean anything to the snake. I'm just showing the target behind his food. And what's happening is the food's a primary reinforcer. It's his instinct to go for the food and eat it. And so by pairing that food with the target over several repetitions and several sessions, in time, he's going to learn that that target means that a reinforcer is coming. So right now, the reinforcement is not contingent on the snake doing any kind of behavior. He's just eating like he normally would, whether that target was there or not. But we're going to pair the target with food several times through a few sessions before the animal's ready to move on to step two, which looks like. Now in step two, we are reinforcing the snake orienting towards the target. So now we have moved from classical conditioning or associative learning into operant conditioning, also known as instrumental learning. So what we're doing now is we're showing the target first with no food, and as soon as the snake responds to that, we're going to give the reinforcement. And so now the target is a conditioned stimulus. He's now been conditioned that when he sees that target, he knows food is coming and he responds to it. So now we have an antecedent, which is me presenting the target. We have a behavior from the animal, which is the snake looking at or orienting towards the target. And then there's a consequence for the snake, which is to get fed or to get reinforced. So now reinforcement is contingent upon the snake orienting towards the target. So he's earning reinforcement because he looked at that target. And that is step two, simple as that. So in our next training talk, we're going to go over the next approximations, which are going to be moving the body further towards the target and possibly touching the target with the nose, and then following the target a short distance, either within the enclosure or towards the enclosure threshold or a little bit out the door. All right, now for what has become one of the popular segments of our Royals in the Ranch series, Royals in Your Homes. I very much appreciate everyone who has already contributed content. Please keep it coming. I'll repeat content if I need to. If I run short, I'll just show the same pictures or videos more than once. And if you've already submitted content, it doesn't mean that you can't submit more. I think that I and everyone else just enjoy seeing royal pythons in families. And so if you want to contribute photos and videos, please use Facebook Messenger or email me at behavioreducationllc@gmail.com. Instagram Messenger is weird. Sometimes I'm able to download the photos and videos that you all send me through Instagram, but sometimes I'm not, and sometimes they disappear. And so what has been very much more reliable for me to receive your videos and photos is Facebook Messenger or email. And Facebook Messenger, you can message me personally at Lori Tarini, or you can message me through the Behavior Education page or the Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary page. Thank you guys so much for watching and for joining me in one more episode of Royals at the Ranch. I hope that you'll tune in next week. This has been Royals at the Ranch for Thursday, August 26, 2021. We will see you in 7 days for another episode. And until then, always remember to please be kind and love your animals.